Guys, I'm going to tell you right now, unequivocally speaking, this poll right here is the most damning poll of the Biden administration. It is the absolute worst poll to date for Joe Biden. It is worse than all the other polls we talked about in terms of overall approval rating. It's worse than his approval on the economy. It's worse than that. And I'm going to explain to you guys why. But the people's trust in Biden in regards to COVID is tanking, right? It's tanking. Okay, as we have a new poll from Axios here that outlines the public's trust in Joe Biden to provide accurate COVID-19 information. And as you can see, looking at this graph here, there's only 45% have a great deal or a fair amount of trust, and 53% not very much to none at all, right? Now, this has crossed over as of late, right? As of August, it looks like it went from most of the public trusting Biden on this issue to most of the public not really trusting Biden on this issue. And like I told you guys, this is huge, right? This is the absolute worst sign for Joe Biden, and I'm gonna explain why. But first, I gotta give my disclaimer here. I'm not making any claims about the mask, the virus, the vaccine, the pandemic. I'm not making any claims whatsoever, right? If you have any questions about the vaccine, the mask, the virus, the pandemic, if you have any questions about anything, please consult your medical professional. Please consult your doctor. My conversation is purely about public policy and public policy only. I'm not making any claims whatsoever. Now, why is this so important? The reason why, guys, is because all last year, the mainstream liberal media made the 2020 election out to be about the pandemic, right? Trump was the worst possible person in office to handle the pandemic, right? According to the mainstream media, Trump was terrible at handling the pandemic. He was the reason for every single COVID death and case in this country, according to the mainstream liberal media. And they basically brainwashed people to believe that, well, if you don't like Trump, or if you do like Trump, you should just vote for Biden because Biden's going to stop the pandemic. Biden essentially ran on the idea that he was going to stop the pandemic, right? That he was going to defeat the virus, okay? And a lot of people bought into that. You know, I think a lot of people saw that as more important than their faith in Trump when it comes to the economy. Because one thing that people loved about Trump is that the economy under Trump, at least pre-COVID, right, was amazing. We had the best economy ever. And usually when you have a great economy, people want to reelect that person, right? Because people like jobs, right? Or at least they used to before this year. But, you know, people like having a great economy. But like I told you guys, the media didn't make the 2020 election about the economy. They made it about the pandemic, okay? And how Joe Biden was supposed to be the savior, right? How Trump was responsible for so many deaths. However, I said back then, right, when this was going on, I said, Biden can talk a big game, but if he gets elected, I don't see any way that he can do better in regards to handling this pandemic than Trump without going full-blown authoritarian. There's no way. Okay? I mean, and just the other day, somebody asked me on Twitter, you know, how I felt about Trump's handling of the country during the pandemic. And I told him I thought Trump did a good job. I think Trump did a good job of balancing freedom and mobilizing the government in the private sector to get protective equipment, testing, and to develop these vaccines, which is what we needed, right? He did a good job of trying to keep things somewhat normal while at the same time mobilizing the resources needed to essentially try to get us back to normal as fast as possible. Now, one area of criticism I have for Trump in regards to his handling of the virus is probably that he gave liberal Democrat governors like Cuomo, maybe he gave them too much power, right? Maybe he gave them too much leeway to handle their states, because that resulted in a lot of deaths, including the nursing home scandal that happened under Cuomo, right? Initially at the beginning of this pandemic, there was a lot of deaths in the Northeast, okay? They had it the worst. Because the liberal Democrat governors, dictators, didn't know what the hell they was doing, right? But the mainstream liberal media blamed every single last one of those deaths on Trump, okay? Instead of blaming it on the people that were actually responsible for it, which were Democrats, okay? Democrats have shown they had the absolute worst at handling this pandemic, bar none. So I thought Trump did basically an amazing job. I really do feel this way. This may be an unpopular opinion on both sides. I feel like probably one of the greatest legacies of Trump's administration, when people are going to look 20 years from now, is his handling of the pandemic. It's going to be the fact that he mobilized the government and the private sector to get testing for protective equipment, for vaccines. I think all that stuff is going to define Trump's legacy in 20 years. I really do. I really do. He's not going to get credit for it now because of the partisan time that we're in, but he will in due time, right? But lo and behold, Biden gets in the White House with the layup in regards to the vaccine from Trump, okay? Fast forward 8 to 9 months from Biden getting in office, we are basically back where we were last year in regards to cases, right? We're in the hundreds of thousands of cases, right? And look at the deaths. We're now back in the thousands of deaths. So, we're doing a little bit better than we were last year. But we have the vaccines now. And there's a decent amount of people that have already caught the virus at least once already. And we're still kind of struggling with this thing, right? If you just look at the overall numbers, put it that way, right? So what has Biden really done that's so much better than Trump? The answer is nothing. Biden hasn't done anything better than what Trump did last year at all. Again, if anything, Biden did less because Biden was not tasked with trying to get vaccines developed, try to get all this equipment and trying to get testing. He wasn't tasked with all that stuff. The Trump administration was tasked with all that stuff. Biden inherited that stuff and benefited from it and still is failing on this, right? And the American people are starting to see it. They're starting to see it mainly because the Democrats and their rhetoric on this is so dumb, right? They're out here continuing to fearmonger about this thing, basically not scaring anybody except their own base, right? They're scaring their own base, which again, I think is feeding into his approval rating and his trust on this subject going down. Now, this is what the media nut hugging Biden the whole time in regards to this issue. The media has not went out to Biden nearly as hard as they should be going after him the same way they went after Trump. Guys, imagine if the media blamed every single COVID case and COVID death on Biden the same way they blamed it on Trump. Just imagine. Just imagine. This number would be so much lower than what it is, right? So much lower. But see, the issue is for the Democrats and the mainstream media, it's the same issue they had with the border, right? They took advantage of a crisis that they knew they couldn't fix, right? Remember, they went after Trump on the border. They had no solutions for the border, right? They ain't had no solutions. They went after Trump on COVID. They have no solutions for COVID, right? They don't have any solutions. The solution it's supposed to be the vaccines, right? But see, the thing is that now, even with the vaccines, like I showed you guys, look at the numbers. Look at the numbers, right? So in the ideal world, I'm not judging Biden for the numbers on the COVID. Like, I understand it's a new virus. We don't know that much about it, right? So, I mean, things are going to happen. They should have gave Trump that same benefit of the doubt. They shouldn't have blamed Trump for every COVID death and every COVID case. Okay? They shouldn't have done that, right? That was the mistake that they made. So now that they've set that precedent that, hey, it's all the president's fault, right? Anything that happens in regards to this virus is the president's fault. Now Biden has to take the blame for it. He has to take the blame for it. But like I said, the reality situation is, guys, that I don't think there's anything that Biden could do. He can't do anything, right? But hey, they said that it's the president's fault. So I now have to hold Biden accountable for it. Because there's no doubt in my mind that this situation right here would be no worse under Trump. No worse at all. The main difference is that we wouldn't have a dictator in chief in office trying to push a vaccine mandate on people. Right? That's the only difference. And it's funny how the mainstream liberal media wanted to call Trump a fascist or dictator, when during a time in which Trump had free reign to be a fascist, a dictator, last year during the pandemic, okay, when this thing first happened, he chose not to. His biggest mistake, honestly, was not being a dictator when it came to controlling these liberal Democratic governors. That probably was his biggest mistake. But he chose not to. He chose to take a hands-off, pro-freedom approach, encourage places to stay open. However, states can have leeway to handle it the way they want to handle it. I'm going to make sure the federal government does their part to try to get the resources needed to keep things as normal as possible, as we can, right? That's what he did. We knew nothing about the virus at the time. Mainstream media say, oh, it's terrible. Biden gets in office with all the layups, right? Learning from all of Trump's mistakes, or they should have learned from all of Trump's mistakes. And he's barely doing better in terms of overall numbers. Barely. And we had a down period this summer. Now, all of a sudden, these numbers have ratcheted back up. So, guys, this is important. And the reason why it's important, right? It's the most important number of the Biden administration is because that's what he ran on. So many people only voted for Biden simply because they didn't trust Trump on the pandemic. They thought that literally getting anybody else in office would shut down the pandemic, and that didn't happen. So now what is the motivation to vote Democrat? What is the motivation? They can't fulfill any of their key promises on the economy, right? We have inflation going through the roof. We have a border crisis. We lost Afghanistan. We don't really have peace in the Middle East anymore. Okay, we're an embarrassment on the world stage. The progressives can't get what they want. Even the lefties in their base can't really get what they want. And now he's doing terrible on COVID as well. Plus, now he has these mandates that are affecting a lot of people that voted for him, right? So what reason do people have to vote for Biden now? The one reason that people had to vote for him is gone. If this keeps up, the Democrats are done come 2022. I don't see what is the motivating factor to get people out to vote. Because the main thing that decides whether or not Democrats really win is if the progressives in their base come out and vote. And it takes a lot for them to come out and vote. They're lazy voters, right? They're lazy voters. That's why they try so hard to try to make it as easy as possible to vote, right? That's basically why they want to essentially, if they could, they basically have a voting machine in your house, right? If they could, because they know that their base, right? The progressive base, they're lazy. They have to be really excited to come out and vote. A lot of those people simply voted not because they like Biden, it's because they hated Trump. They thought Trump was the reason why the pandemic was so bad, right? Now that that's proven not to be true, what reason do they have to vote for Biden? I just outlined a list of things that was going wrong in his administration. I can't think of one area that Biden is actually doing well on. I can't think of it. So there no longer is a reason to vote for Biden anymore because this was his last hope. And that's why he was so gung-ho about the vax mandates, right? He's so gung-ho about it because he knew that the numbers were getting out of control again. And with that being said, he would lose his last reason for people to actually vote for him. But it seems that that's even backfired because now, in line with him announcing the mandates, his numbers dropped, right? His numbers have dropped even more on this issue, even after announcing the mandates, right? But the mainstream liberal media swears up and down. Everybody agrees with it. Everybody agrees with that, right? Obviously, something's not adding up here. So, like I told you guys, this is a huge deal. This is the most important number of the Biden administration. And he is now losing on this issue, which, in my opinion, really puts the nail in the coffin in regards to the Democrats in 2022 and Biden's presidency in 2024. Assuming that he doesn't have some type of miracle turnaround. So, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.